There's 7 rules of CPM. In this slide we'll concentrate on the first 2 rules. The remaining 5 rules will be discussed in later slides under the heading of how to create a good or bad habit. The first rule is the conscious versus the subconscious. Throughout this course we've talked about that the conscious mind includes the ego and the conscious self. The subconscious mind includes 2 separate parts. It includes the shadow, which is everything where people or yourself have gone against your own conscience and developed a negative outcome, and they sit in your shadow. Your conscience, on the other hand, is where all the positives are, from which the spirit operates through the conscience to give you correct guidance. And the subconscious mind is the master. But we've got to be careful we're not deluded by the shadow as distinct from the conscience. So the shadow will have negative or false messages coming to our consciousness, whereas the conscience will only give us positives. So we need discernment to be able to sit and think when we receive messages from our subconscious mind, is this really coming from my conscience or is it coming from my shadow? Because if it's coming from my shadow, it's coming from the wrong place and I have to ignore it. So this is the first rule. Listen to your conscience, not your shadow. The second rule relates to principle thinking and comparative thinking. Comparative thinking by the conscious mind includes logic. By comparing this and that, it's part of the comparative predictive cycle we go through. But it always needs to be guided by principles. That's why in this model we've provided the 49 principles at different levels so that you can work through them and use them to support your comparative thinking, which is done in your conscious mind. So always refer back to the principles, looking at what level you're on and what's the next highest level to move to improve the principle and therefore improve the comparative thinking and the outcome. These are the 5 rules to create a good or a bad habit. The 5 rules are: use influence, not concern. Control and responsibility have to be equal. Support and challenge have to be equal. In positive situations, it's about the person, but in negative situations, it's about the behaviour. And finally, you stay inside yourself to solve problems, don't go outside yourself. These are the guiding principles, and now we'll go on and have a look at the detail. The rule of influence versus concern is a very simple one to understand, but not so simple to do. Influence means I can do something about it, and concern means I can do nothing about it. So if I can't do anything about it, I just accept it. So I have to use a high-level principle of just unconditional acceptance. So I just accept it. I cannot do anything about it. This is the first step in creating a good habit. If you're going to have concern and worry about things you can't do anything about, you will end up with a bad habit. So start off in the right foot with influence, which means I can do something about it. So influence versus concern. It mainly relates to time. So we need to be very clear on how we use time with influence and concern. So the past is only for knowledge. So if we use our influence, we'll only use the past for knowledge. And once we've got the knowledge about the past, we'll stop. We won't develop concern and become an if-only person. If only this hadn't happened. If only. Otherwise, we'll end up getting ourselves depressed, because that's one way into depression. Going over the past, we've already got the knowledge, but doing if only. The future is for planning, because without a plan, you're like a cork on the ocean. Whichever way the wind and tide are blowing, that's where you'll end up. So you need a plan to know where you're going. But once you've got a plan, you don't move into concern and keep doing too many what ifs. That's part of the planning process, not after you've had the plan. Because if you do the what ifs all the time, you'll get anxiety. So if you're moving between the past with if onlys and the future with what ifs, you're just constantly moving between anxiety and depression. So you're supposed to stay in the present. Focus on your logic, use the principles, and use your influence, not your concern. That's how you operate. The rule here is control versus responsibility, and they need to be balanced. So on the left-hand axis, the vertical axis, we've got control from low to high, and on the horizontal axis, we've got responsibility from low to high. But at any point, they should always be balanced, because if they become unbalanced, we get a problem. So if we've got too much control, but not enough responsibility, we're going to be controlling and abusive with anger. We're in the fight mode. Conversely, if we've got too much responsibility, but not enough control, we're going to get anxiety. If we try and give up control and responsibility and be down that left-hand box down the bottom, we'll get depressed because we're underperforming. We're not performing to our normal range or potential. The optimum position is to have high control and have high responsibility and achieve high performance. Sometimes we can be overly controlling with fight. On other occasions, we can be overly responsible with perfectionism. And with perfectionism, we're taking far too much responsibility for the amount of control we have, and we end up with high anxiety. So we're trying to stay balanced between control and responsibility. That's the principle. Here we're looking at challenge versus support, and the principle is they have to be balanced. So on the left-hand vertical axis, we have challenge from low to high, and on the horizontal axis, we have support from low to high. So no matter what level we are on the axis, the two have to be balanced, support versus challenge. Because if we have too much support and not enough challenge, we become lazy and self-entitled. If we have too much challenge and not enough support, then we can go into fight, flight or freeze, where we get angry, anxious or avoidant. And we'll have a look at an example of that on the next slide. So here we're looking at two different rules, support versus challenge on the vertical and horizontal axis, and behaviour versus person, which is in the 4 columns. I'll use a rather exaggerated example to explain where things get out of balance. So let's assume I'm the owner of a business that gets paid by the government to employ you. On the first column, I'm negative and personal towards you and everyone else in the business. I just don't care. So I don't challenge you or support you at the start. I just let you sit there and you're feeling despair and hopeless and shame because you're doing nothing all day. Then I decide there's jobs which I need done which other people are reluctant to do. So I give you those jobs to do. So I'm challenging you more. The other people start abusing you and bullying you, but I don't care. You're starting to feel rejection and rage and even paranoid fear as I keep putting the pressure on and the abuse starts rising from other members of the staff. You're operating in column 1, negative and personal. In the second column, I'm the owner of the business. I'm interested in getting job done, but I don't care who I affect in doing that. So I'll give you some training, but only enough to do the basic skills to get the job done. So you're feeling bored or confusion, or you're having guilt. I might start to give you more work without training. You're still starting to get bullied a bit, but I don't care because I'm only interested in getting the job done. So you're starting to feel anxious, critical, develop a bit of anger and fear the more I'm challenging you without training. In the third situation, it's positive and behavioural. So I want the job done the best way it can be done with the least amount of conflict. So I'm giving you more training. I'm more patient with you. I'm teaching you self-control, to be calm. I'm evaluating your performance. I'm stopping any bullying by being assertive towards others. And develop courage in yourself so that your performance is better and I get a good outcome. Now finally, I'm the fourth person. I'm positive and personal that owns the business. I care about you. I give you a lot of good training. I show you empathy. I'm compassionate towards you. I commit for your improvement. I accept that you've got weaknesses. I respect you as a person, and I'll trust you'll do the right thing. I'm giving you a lot of support and appropriate challenge. So if you look at those 4 examples, it's clear that you'd rather work in column 4, positive and personal, than work for me in column 1, where it's negative and personal. And that's the purpose of the cognitive behavioural matrix, to move you out of the very bad habits of negative and personal right through to the very positive habits of positive and personal. The rule about behaviour versus the person is that when things are positive, then they are personal. But when things are negative, they are behavioural. So you follow this statement. I make mistakes, I feel guilty, I develop self-control, and I commit and fix the problem. The alternative is when things are negative and taken personally, means you've lost respect or trust and you're trying to force respect. You become fearful of losing control and emotions, and instincts have taken over and you've moved to the fight-flight. So that what you follow is not mistakes, you follow failure, not guilt, shame, not self-control, blame, and you either attack or avoid, and there's no fix. So you always follow positive personal, negative behavioural. The last rule is inside versus outside, and the principle is that you stay inside yourself. You don't go outside yourself to fix problems and show bad behaviour. Early in my career, I worked at a drug and alcohol centre where the residents were there for 12 months to try and improve themselves so they could get back into society. And I'd often ask them, why did you take drugs or alcohol? And some of them would say, originally, alcohol was for courage, that they couldn't socialise when they were young men with women, so they'd drink, and it gave them courage to socialise. Or they couldn't stand up to bullies or their father, and they'd drink alcohol and want to fight. While alcohol can be a stimulant for courage, it can be also a depressant for avoidance. If you binge drink, trying to avoid life, it becomes a defence mechanism for avoidance. Other users would take marijuana because they couldn't find peace in their life. So it gave them a sense of peace, smoking marijuana all day. But people don't only use drug and alcohol. They use people pleasing to try and get acceptance from others. Or they use perfectionism also for acceptance or to feel in control. They'll use anger to force respect or trust, or once again to be in control. You don't go outside yourself, you stay inside yourself and fix the problem. We use the 5 rules to create a good habit. We use influence, not concern. If we use concern, it means we can't do anything about it. We create anxiety. So we need the unconditional acceptance to accept the concern. Control and responsibility have to be equal. If they get out of balance, we can blame or avoid. So we need the spiritual principle of suffering so that we grow out of it. Support and challenge should be equal. If they get out of balance, we can continue to ruminate. We need unconditional giving of support. When things are positive, they're personal, but when they're negative, they're behavioural. So we don't focus on the person, we focus on the behaviour. Otherwise, we'll end up detaching from ourselves. We need the spiritual principle of peace to get back to focus on behaviour when it's negative. We always stay inside ourselves, don't go outside ourselves with bad behaviour. If we do, we need hope and forgiveness to get back to the right path.